Happy and healthy altitudes to you. My name is Alex Burgess. I'm a registered dietitian, and today I'm here to share with you a healthy and nutritious recipe that you can make at home. So one of my favorite activities during the summer is to go at the local farmers markets and look for the freshest and latest produce that is available. I love fruits and vegetables that were grown just a few miles down the road because they're really just flavorful and a lot fresher, higher quality. And I also just love going to the farmers market because it's a great activity to do with my family. It's some quality family time. So I encourage you to do the same with your family or friends the next free weekend you have. So the last time I was there, I actually saw the most beautiful corn and these big red ripe tomatoes, and I had a great idea to make a summer salsa. I love corn and tomatoes in my salsa, and so I came up with just a quick, easy recipe that you can make at home. It pairs great with tortilla chips or even on top of some fresh grilled chicken. Either way, however you have it, it tastes great and it's filled with healthy nutrients. So today I want to share with you my recipe for summer salsa. Alright, so let's get started with the summer salsa. The recipe is pretty easy to make. It's only really 5 ingredients and then maybe a little salt or pepper or any other spices you want to add in for flavor. But really the essentials are tomatoes, corn, cilantro, jalapenos, and then a little bit of lime juice. So I'm going to go ahead and get ready preparing these ingredients. So we'll start with the corn. Now I just got a fresh corn cob here. I haven't even cooked it, and you can definitely eat fresh corn. I just peeled the green stuff off of there, got the little extra strands out of there too, just because we really want just those fresh corn kernels. So this recipe is great too because it's a way to practice your knife skills, and a lot of people these days really are not as comfortable in the kitchen as maybe they should be, especially because cooking at home is a great way to spend family time and then also just improve the health of your meals. It's a lot easier to control kind of the nutrition of your own homemade meals versus when you're ordering out and you really just don't know what is in the food that you're getting. So today I'm gonna share a couple tips with knife skills as well. So to begin with the corn, something really important to remember, there's really 3 important things to think about when you're cutting up fruits or vegetables or whatever. First of all, you want to make sure whatever you're cutting on your cutting board is stable. So one thing that you can do if your cutting board is slipping around, you can actually wet a paper towel and lay that underneath the cutting board, and then that'll keep it from moving around. The second thing you want to remember is that whatever you're cutting, whether it's corn, tomatoes, apples, anything, especially with those round things, you want to try to start with a flat surface. So for example, with this corn, I'm going to be cutting the corn kernels off this way, and this little end is a little bit rough, so I'm just going to cut that flat so now it'll sit straight and it won't be moving around when I'm cutting on it. And then the other thing to remember is that you want to protect your fingers at all costs, especially when you're working with sharp knives. It can be really dangerous if you're just kind of careless with your fingers. So one thing to think about is you want it like a claw. Keep your fingers curved and down like a claw, and then that'll protect the knife from kind of cutting off any fingertips, which we don't want. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut the corn. And I've kind of got a claw here, although it's a little tricky with the shape of the corn. And then I'm just gonna go ahead and cut right down. Some of the kernels might fly away, but in general, this method helps keep all the corn pretty much in the same space. It just falls down onto the cutting board, and there you go. I'm gonna do this with all 4 sides of the corn. And one thing to keep in mind with the corn is that if you happen to maybe grill out the night before, had chicken and corn on the cob, you can easily use grilled corn. That'll add a great smoky flavor to the salsa as well. And I'm gonna go ahead and cut these kernels off. Get this last one. But yes, you can use fresh corn, and if you can't find it at the farmer's market, the grocery store has a ton of options, and usually it's pretty cheap as well. So this salsa is also very affordable to make. So the recipe that I came up with uses about a cup of corn kernels, a cup of tomatoes, kind of equal parts, and you can really adjust the recipe as much as you want. But here I'd say about 1 cob of corn gets you about a cup of corn kernels. So I'm gonna go ahead and throw all those into my bowl here, and then we'll get going with the tomatoes next. Toss that in there. You get a little bit of mess, but you're not having fun if you're not messy, you know? So, all right. Next up, we've got the tomatoes. So again, I'm using Roma tomatoes just because they're not as juicy, and so I prefer that in my salsa. These have a nice flat edge, but if you don't happen to have a tomato that's just flat and it's kind of just a big round sphere, again, you just want to cut off a slice where you can, keep those fingers curved, and then from there you've got a flat surface to work with. So put that on the cutting board and then your tomato won't move around as much. So I'm just going to slice these guys and then come around here, flip them over, and again, slice them a couple rows, and then really I just want cubes. I like the salsa that I make kind of chunky, so I've got some pretty big dice or cubes, I guess. But really with the fun of cooking at home is that you can adjust it as much as you want. So if you like that really fine cut tomatoes in your salsa, then go ahead and do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and continue cutting these all up, and then I'll be back when I've got all the tomatoes done. Okay, so I have all my tomatoes here cut up. This is about a cup, and it really only took me, I think, 2 Roma tomatoes. You might need 2 to 3 depending on the size of your tomatoes, and if you have one of those big beefsteak tomatoes that are often like this big, then you might just need 1. Really, you just want about a cup of diced tomatoes. So I've got that here, and I'm just gonna add it to my bowl. And the beauty of salsa is you can just toss everything into a bowl pretty quickly, and then at the end, stir it up and you're done. Pretty easy prep. So I'm just gonna clear this juice off a little bit, and then we'll move on to the next ingredient. So the next thing I've got is cilantro. And this, you don't want a ton of the stemmy pieces just because they're a little fibrous, and that can just affect the flavor and kind of the texture as well. So I might pick off the leaves of some of these stems, but you really don't have to do everything perfectly. You can definitely get some of the stems, especially closer to the top of, I guess, the stem where there's more leaves. Those are pretty thin and they're not gonna affect anything too much. So I'm just gonna bunch up my cilantro here. And you can see here on the far end, I've got pretty big stem pieces, so I'm just gonna chop those off and set them aside. But then for the rest, I'm just gonna bunch up the cilantro and just kind of make slicing motions across the whole bunch, just to get a rough chop, nothing too crazy. So get that going, and then I might just come back, do this little motion a couple times through just to chop them up into a little bit smaller pieces so it'll mix in nicely with the rest of the ingredients. One thing to keep in mind is you just want to keep the knife touching the cutting board at all times. That'll make it easier to cut whatever you're chopping up, and then it'll also be a little safer. So now I'm just gonna scoop that up. You might get a little more than a 1/4 cup. I love cilantro in my salsa, so I've definitely got a good amount here, but really all you need is a 1/4 cup, and that'll bring plenty of flavor. So I'll go ahead and add that to my bowl. I'm gonna clear off this cutting board in my hands a little bit, and then I'll come back and do the jalapeno next. All right, so I've got my cutting board cleaned off now. So I'm gonna work with the jalapeno next, and something you wanna keep in mind, especially if you're cooking with your kids and getting them involved, you wanna be in mind of the spice level of whatever pepper you're cooking with. So really anything that is spicier than a jalapeno, you wanna be careful with touching your hands to the pepper and then touching your face, because you can really easily get it in your eye, and then that'll burn and not be a fun time for anyone. So now, of course, it's fine to touch the outside of the pepper, but once you cut into it, that's when you need to be cautious. So to help with that, I've got these nifty disposable gloves, something to keep on hand, especially if you like working with spicy foods. So I'm just gonna put 1 glove on, just on the hand that I'll really be touching the pepper with, and then the knife hand, I don't need a glove for, I'm not gonna touch the pepper at all. And so today, I don't like a ton of spice in my salsa, so I'm probably just gonna cut open about half of this jalapeno, and then set the other half over there, and I'm just gonna finely dice this or mince it, and then we'll go from there. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut open. I like to kind of cut it into slices because those are easier to work with and they lay flat on the cutting board. Again, important for safety. Sometimes these gloves can be a little tricky to work with, so if you're really careful, you can work without a glove as long as you're washing your hands as soon as you're done working with the pepper. But really, especially if you're working with kids again, this is a great way to just reduce the risk of any mishaps with the spicy peppers. So I'm gonna go ahead and get all those seeds out of there too, because the seeds are usually what carry the most heat. And then I'm gonna finally slice these jalapeno peppers. Put those across, and then I'm gonna go the other way to mince them. And just get them into pretty small pieces that'll mix in, again, mix in well with the salsa. So keeping the knife touching the cutting board at all times. At least the tip part stays touching the cutting board, and then we'll finish mincing these. All right, perfect. So I've got those pretty well chopped up. The recipe I have uses a 1/4 cup. This here is probably just a couple tablespoons, and that's fine with me because, again, I'm not a huge fan of spice. So I'll go ahead and add that to the bowl. And that's the great part about working with food at home and cooking your own recipes, is you can adjust them as much as you needed, whether that means reducing the spice level, or if you like a spicy salsa, then go ahead and throw the whole pepper in, and that'll taste great as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove this glove, throw it over there for now. And then the last thing I have to add is just the lime juice. I've already juiced a half of a lime, and that got me about a tablespoon. So I'm just gonna pour that over the salsa. That'll just add a really fresh and bright flavor to it. And then all you need to do is mix up the salsa. So I'll grab a spoon here and just stir everything up. You can see it's very colorful. It looks delicious already. I love how the green kind of contrasts with the red and yellow, almost white from the corn. It just looks beautiful, and it's super easy to make, especially if once you get those knife skills down and you can cut really quickly, you can whip this together in probably 5 minutes. And really that's all there is to it. If you want to add a little bit of salt, sprinkle that over the top. That'll just bring out the flavors even more. But especially if you're getting your fruits or vegetables, in this case your tomatoes, corn, jalapeno, whatever you can find at the farmer's market, it's gonna taste great because you know it's fresh, it was grown just a few miles down the road, and it's probably only a few days old. So that is my recipe for a summer salsa. I encourage you guys to check out the recipe on healthyaltitudes.com. You can go ahead and find the blog post. It'll be up there, so it's easy to follow. It has the ingredients, directions, and just a little bit extra information about the nutrition as well if you're interested in that. So again, head over to healthyaltitudes.com, and I hope you have a healthy and happy day.